This is Nick Baisley here with FilmSnobbery.com. I'm actually here at the Orlando Film Festival at the beautiful Plaza Cinema Cafe, and today I'm sitting down with
Tom Parker.
Tom. What are you here at the festival for?
I'm here with the FOWLER Formula, my first film, a short documentary on people who re-energized the sport of small motorcycle racing in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, congratulations on making your first film, and I will ask, what kind of gave you the inspiration? Why motorcycles?
I've ridden motorcycles since I was 12 years old, and so when I took a documentary workshop in Portland, Oregon, I just wanted to make a movie that I would want to see. I didn't know any other way to do it other than just make something I would want to go see.
Now, did you watch a lot of other movies leading up to this to kind of give you a little bit of do a little research?
I'm an avid film goer, so I've watched a ton of films. I did do a little bit of documentary film research, and obviously there's classics, which is sort of presumptuous to compare myself to people like Bruce Brown, right? But yeah, I did look at a lot of motorcycle films and see how they did it, and then ended up just fumbling my way through and sort of ignoring everything I saw and doing the best I could.
Now, in this film, did you kind of focus on the entirety of the culture, or was it more? Did you follow individual people in doing what they were doing? How did you create the story?
The story started out as a profile piece. This was part of a workshop that was basically 10 weeks, make an 8 to 11 minute film. So it really had to be focused, and that turned out to be less interesting than I thought it was going to be. And by the time I was done, I was trying to tell 40 years of Honda motorcycle history in the film, and so I ended up telling really the story of how this sport migrated from a couple people in Seattle down to Portland and then sort of expanded. It's kind of blown up in terms of vintage motorcycle racing around the country.
And when you say vintage motorcycle racing, you also mentioned Honda. What kind of bikes are we talking? What kind of bikes are we using?
The bikes in the film are Honda CB160s that hit the U.S. in 1965, and were done by 68, 69. So everything being ridden in the film, they're all 40 years old, basically.
What's the appeal of that particular bike?
It's interesting. The CB160 was just a little street bike that I guess 40 years ago wasn't so little. 1,000cc motorcycle that people ride today, or go buy a 600cc race bike as your first motorcycle, just wasn't the thing back then. 400cc's was a big bike. So 160 was just a pretty standard small motorcycle, but they just handled amazingly well for the bike that they were. It was a new kind of frame, one of the earliest bikes that did that sort of frame that had a stiffness and a great suspension. It was an amazing handling bike for the cost and the size.
Now, I would imagine that with anything that has whether it's cars, motorcycles, anything like that, there's always going to be a technical issue here or there or whatever. Is it easy to still find parts for a CB160, or is it if something breaks down during the shoot, or how would you get around if someone was like, this isn't starting, cut?
As one of the guys actually says in the film, they ended up what happened was they got the idea to start racing these small bikes, and they gathered a bunch of people and decided we're just going to, in 3 months, build a whole bunch of them. We're all going to start racing these motorcycles. And they said that they bought 20 or 25 old rusted CB160s in order to just put together 9. So, it's a matter of sort of resurrecting them from the dead and really just getting whatever catch can.
Before I get back to the movie, one little off-topic question: What was your first bike?
My first bike, my parents actually went through sort of a midlife crisis, and the whole family got motorcycles when I was 12 years old, and I got a small Kawasaki Enduro. It was like a KE 125 or a KE 175, and that's actually. It's a good question, because it's actually a thought for a film that I want to do in the near future about people's first motorcycles, because I think everybody has that bike. If you're a motorcyclist, and it may not be the first one you ever had, but everybody has the first bike, whether it's the first one you bought or the first one you rode or the first one that you bought new or whatever. There's a bike that if somebody says, what was your first motorcycle, you always think of that motorcycle. And I would love to put together a film with just interviews of and talking to a bunch of different people about what was your first motorcycle.
And as far as the budget for the Fowler formula, how did you go ahead raising this? And I mean, did you have to make some personal sacrifices to do it, or was this kind of like, I'm going to cut into the retirement a little bit, or how did you go ahead and get it done?
Well, as a small workshop project, this was really no budget. A few $1,000s, basically, mostly travel expenses up to Seattle to shoot some interviews, and I would say that the festival submission budget has far eclipsed the actual film budget. So it was not an expensive film for me to make. I had purchased the Canon XHA1, an HDV camera that I've had for a couple years now, that I bought, and so that was, I already had that. Rented a couple extra GL2s from the documentary program to make it. So it was pretty inexpensive, and I think that's what's sort of wonderful about the time we live in.
Tech is cheap until it breaks, and then you have to replace it, and you're like, oh, I remember this being a lot cheaper.
Right.
So you made this, you took like a documentary class or program. There was a documentary program. What was the biggest piece or biggest thing you got from that program? I mean, in terms of whether it's from an educational standpoint or just even from, networking or just working in the program itself, just being in there, because, you're not in college anymore. I mean,
Right.
you're older than I am. Let's leave it at that. So, I mean, did you find it daunting to get started with this? I mean, what did you have to get out of it in order to make this film?
Right. I think the biggest thing I got out of the program was sort of structure. I'd always been interested in film, and it's something I've sort of read about and followed and sort of been interested in my whole life. So from the perspective of the workshop, I probably knew more technically, which isn't a lot, but I knew more technically than probably anybody else in the class. But what I really got out of it was sort of a group of people who were similarly situated, who were all sort of in the same boat, who were helping each other, and a structure and a timeline that sort of forced me to get it done.
And when you were finished and you started submitting to film festivals, did you kind of have a plan? I mean, did you have a plan even for distribution or anything? It was just like, I made this first film and I just want people to see it.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much what I did. I put it out on Vimeo right away for the motorcycle community to see, and so they could all take a look at it. And then I sort of took it down and started doing festival submissions once I'd had that sort of preview for everybody. And I didn't really have a plan for festival submission. Having done it now, I've learned a lot about maybe being a little bit more strategic about where I try to take it and what I try to do. But I don't think I really had any decent strategy when I started out.
And it's a learning experience for everyone, I think, in independent film anyway. So, I mean, definitely nothing against anybody. I mean, it's constantly changing out there, and there are new festivals cropping up all the time. And I see films like yours, too, that have that kind of genre, whether it be classic cars, classic bikes, that gearhead kind of mentality behind it. Speaking of the gearheads, now the people who are riding these bikes, you're following them and all. What kind of access did you have, and did you ever run into any issues, with the access to these people at all? And did you have to overcome anything, or were there people that were just kind of hesitant and kind of put the brakes on, so to speak?
Right. I think everybody was really open and welcoming. I think the community was super nice, and everybody we spoke to was really happy to speak to us. I think the title character was probably the one who was maybe the most difficult, just because he's a Seattle artist and he's gotten a lot of attention, and he's at one point said, people come out for magazine articles and things. I get a lot of this sort of freak of the week stuff, and so he might have been a little bit. Maybe a little bit worried about how he'd end up being portrayed, but he's seen the film and he liked it a lot, and so I think everybody overall, is happy with their participation and how they came out.
Excellent. Well, I want to tell everyone out there again, check out the Fowler Formula at a film festival near you, or here at the Orlando Film Festival if you happen to be attending. And I want to thank you for sitting down with us and chatting with us, sir. Thank you.
Talking to you.
Thank you.